Hello and welcome to Chapter 4, Scope Planning. This is your video lecture for this topic, and let's get started. The agenda has three main questions that need to be answered during scope planning. What do the project stakeholders need? What will the project produce? And what are the details? Just a reminder of the project life cycle. We are squarely now in the planning phase. We are going to examine scope planning. And just a reminder that during the planning phase, while these chapters appear sequentially, in reality, the process of planning means that we are considering often many of these topics of scope, schedule, budget, team, and so on interchangeably. So they affect each other and so on. So just be aware that the planning process is not as sequential as these chapters tend to suggest. So let's move on. A summary. For the three main questions we've looked at, each of them result in project management documentation or project management deliverables. For example, what do the project stakeholders need is documented in something called the project requirements document. When we look at what will the project produce, this involves the creation of the work breakdown structure. And then what are the details is the creation of the project scope statement. So we're going to look at each of those individually. Now, when we look at what do the project stakeholders need, this is where things start in project scope. In order to define the project scope, the needs or requirements of the project stakeholders are determined. So the fact that we have understand who our project stakeholders are, what do they do, and so on is very useful in project scope planning because it's their needs or requirements which drive the scope. Requirements may be gathered in many ways, so there's not one way of doing it. It depends. This can be interviews with stakeholders, and interviews can mean a variety of meetings. They can be group meetings, one-on-one meetings, and so on. But it's basically interacting directly with one or more stakeholders. When there is a large number of stakeholders involved, it might be, say, the general public or large numbers of customers, surveys can be used. Another tool is focus groups can be put together. Again, usually used when there is a large number of stakeholders, as well as research can be done in terms of what are the types of things that our stakeholders may need. So we can do various types of research. At this point, please pause this video and go to your textbook in the appropriate chapter and read the case study update, Creating the Project Requirements. So I'll just pause this video and come on back when you've done that reading. Okay, you are back. In terms of that case study update, the project manager, Sophie, reviews the project charter and business case. Remember, that was what has been already created during the initiating phase, and we're now going to build onto that. The scope of the project should be based on the direction provided in these two documents. So the budget that has been defined, the goals and objectives, the due date, and so on, those are all that is all information and constraints that we are working within. As you saw in the case study, in order to help define the project requirements, a business analyst joins the project. So oftentimes during the planning phase, we'll see additional team members being added to help with the planning process. Jason primarily uses interviews with key stakeholders to gather requirements, though he also researches past product launch projects. So we see in the case study that he's using various techniques, but primarily focused on meeting with and discussing the stakeholders' requirements directly with them. Here's the resulting document that is created during the case study update. You can see that the requirements have been divided into two categories. There are functional requirements, and there are technical performance requirements. And again, these are the things that our stakeholders need from this project. There's not a large amount of detail necessarily. For example, if we look at the functional requirements. Point number 5, the promotional video should be professional and engaging and should demonstrate the key features of the new version of DecoCam. That's what they require. Now, the details of how long it will be and what will happen in the script and so on, that hasn't been planned yet, but these are the requirements. Now, if our stakeholders felt that the promotional video should not be longer than 3 minutes, that would be documented here. So anything that is a need is documented, and it's put into this document and divided into different categories as makes sense. Okay, now on to the next question. What will the project produce? So now we have a transition. We previously looked at needs. Now we're going to look at what will be produced. So that's our next step. This consists of 2 main processes and resulting documents: the work breakdown structure and the project scope statement. Collectively, they define the scope of the project. And the scope is what will the project create. Again, please refer to your course textbook, and please review the case study update, creating the work breakdown structure. So just pause the video and then come on back here once you're done that reading. Okay, so now you're back. So we'll look at what happened in the case study rather than view the product launch as one large effort, which can be daunting. Sophie breaks the project into smaller chunks of work that are easier to define and manage. And that is fundamental to our planning process, is to take a large effort and break it down into smaller chunks or bits or pieces of work. It's like you're breaking it down into each of its components. Sophie and Jason decide that there are 3 main categories of work. When they look at this large product launch, they through their analysis say, well, it really consists of trade show support. We have to do some communications, and we need to produce a promotional video. And so this is their taking one project and splitting it into 3 chunks. They then break each of these main categories into even smaller chunks of work. And this is the decomposition process that is inherent in creating the work breakdown structure. So here is the results of their work. They took trade show support and broke it down into 3 smaller chunks: trade show signage, booth giveaways, and multimedia demo. Communications was broken down into 4 things: press release, media outreach, social media, and website updates. And then the promotional video, they didn't break it down further. They thought that that's where they would stop. Now, this is the work breakdown structure, and there's various terminology that is true for a work breakdown structure. So these, you notice the high level of the work breakdown structure, the 1, 2, and 3. These chunks of works are called deliverables. A deliverable is something that is produced during the project. Trade show support, communications, and promotional video are deliverables. So those are our deliverables, and in this case, we can refer to them as our high-level deliverables. Now, these deliverables may be broken down into smaller deliverables, sub-deliverables, you might call them. For example, the communications deliverable may be broken down into the press release, media outreach, social media, and website updates deliverables. Now, here's where the terminology comes in. When a deliverable is not broken down any further, it is also called a work package. So work packages are deliverables that are not broken down further. So here's a question for you. On the work breakdown structure that we can see on the left side of the screen, how many work packages do we have? Now just pause for a moment. You can think about that, and I'll answer that question in a minute or in a few seconds. So just think about that. Pause the video if you want to think about it further. Anyways, the answer is there are, and if we look at it, there's 1, 2, 3, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 are 3 work packages. And then these 4 are work packages. So we're up to 7. And then promotional video is a work package because it is not broken down further. Versus All of them are deliverables, right? So all of these are deliverables, but only the ones at the lowest level that are not broken down are also called work packages. Students often find this confusing, that something is called two things, but it's just something that is true. And another way to look at this, trade show support is not a work package because it is broken down. Communications is not a work package because it is broken down. So that's a way to look at it. Okay, at this point, this is a link to a video on YouTube that provides another description or another way of viewing the work breakdown structure, as well as the process of creating one. So I'm not going to show it here. What I would suggest is to pause this video, go on to YouTube, and just search for project planning with sticky notes, and you'll find it right away. Please watch this video. It's just a few minutes long, but it's a very good video for demonstrating the work breakdown structure process. Okay, so once you've done that, come on back here. Now the next step, once you have a work breakdown structure created, is to, well, what are the details of the project? The work breakdown structure defines kind of the names of each work package, but not a lot about, well, what does it actually do, and what are the details? And that's where the project scope statement comes in. For example, in the WBS for the DecoCam project, the trade show signage deliverable / work package was defined. We now need to define its characteristics, including, well, what types of signs, how many, what type of information will be on the signs, are there any procedures that need to be updated? These are all very important questions and information. In order for us to produce it, we need to know this, but the WBS is silent about this. So this is now where the project scope statement comes in. Again, pause this video, go to the textbook, and please read the case study update, creating the project scope statement. So I'll just pause here for a moment. Come on back when you're done. Okay, so in this video, or in this case study update, we saw that Sophie, the project manager, recalls past projects where disagreements about the project scope caused problems throughout the project. So when the scope is not defined in detail, there can often be disagreements that occur. Stakeholders will say later in the project, I thought we were doing this, or we were supposed to do that, and it can cause a lot of problems. During these past projects, Sophie remembered that stakeholders forgot about previous discussions. Team members were often uncertain about what they needed to produce. They were new team members. They came on the project and they didn't know what the details were. And many small but important details were missed. So what she resolved to do to avoid this problem during her DecoCam version 4 project was to create a detailed project scope statement. In effect, to write down the details of the scope, not just leave it in people's heads and have discussions that never get written down, but to write it down. And this is the appearance of the project scope statement. So notice you'll recognize the WBS. You can see it there, but you can also see all kinds of details about the signs. For example, for the trade show signage, the signs will be retractable. There'll be 5 of them. They will integrate with the company's existing trade show setup and branding. They'll show the product's features. They'll display links to more product information, website links or those types. And they will update the trade show supplies procedures and data files to allow for the order of additional banners on an ongoing basis. And you can see similar levels of detail for the other work packages. And if we just go on, we can see all of the information. Now, this is a point where oftentimes people new to project management, there's sort of a resistance to writing down this level of detail. I can assure you that it is very important and is something that should be done. You want to avoid the problems that Sophie experienced on her previous projects, such as people forgetting or team members not sure or confusion that happens during the executing phase. If you just write it down, then everybody can get on the same page. The last section of the project scope statement, and this is something that sometimes surprises people, is not only as we define what is in scope, but we define things that are out of scope, things that could have been included but are not. And it's better than, rather than just say, well, if it's not in the first section, I guess we're not doing it. This specifically mentions it just to avoid confusion. For example, the first one, uh, the distribution. The project is going to create some social media um, posts to be done, but they're not going to be the ones that actually send them out. That's going to be done by marketing. Um, the second one, the distribution of the software. This is not going to be done by our project. This will be performed by the installation project. So we're just being clear as this is what we are doing, this is what we're not doing. And a good scope statement should have both of those. And those are the references. And that's the end of the video lecture. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.